Hi, everybody. We're live with Inside Scoop with Sue. And today I am here with psychologist Jodie Eckleberry-Hunt, who's the author. Did I say that wrong?
You did. No, I was just waving.
Okay. Um, so Jodie is the author of Badass Stories, Grit, Growth, Hope, and Healing in the Shit Show. And a bunch of other books. Check her out. There's a bunch of other books. Hold them up for us.
There you go.
Badass Stories. There you go. I read a bunch of the Badass Stories. They're excellent. I really liked it. I recommend it to everybody to check out her books. And I wanted to start with I don't know if you always get asked this question, but it's like the most obvious one to me, which is like, what's with your liberal use of profanities and what started that?
So, in the tradition of great psychologists, not that I am, a lot of what we know works was self-discovery. Discovery with our kids, actually, Piaget studying his own kids and all of that. But I was in a horrible work situation, very toxic. And I kept saying, okay, just let it go. Just transcend it, move on, and arguing with my self-talk. And none of it was working. And I felt like a real asshole, in fact, because that's what I told my patients to do. And I happened to have a colleague who worked with me. And one of the ways we coped was to just liberally swear. And what I happened to notice was doing that made us laugh. And the laughter was a little bit healing. Didn't fix the situation, but it felt like relief of some of the pressure, like a valve was turned. And so I started thinking, gosh, I wonder if actually patients would benefit from this. So I experimented a little bit, and people really liked it because it elicited laughter. So it doesn't fix that we're in painful situations, but it somehow is cathartic. So I decided before somebody reported me to the licensing board, I needed to look this up. And there is a whole area of research on swearing for the release of pain. The classic ice bucket study, for example, where they had folks, two groups, put their hands in a bucket of ice water. And the group that was told to swear as a coping skill was able to leave their hand in the ice bucket for longer and reported lower levels of pain compared to the other group who was told you can't swear. And so I tell people, the neurolinguists, the psychologists, Stanford, Harvard, this is a bona fide science that tells us it's actually healthy to swear. And so anyway, it was just something I discovered, and I love it because it brings forth laughter.
So you embrace this, and we raise teenagers, and we, from a very young age, tell them that all of those words are bad words. And even if we allow them in our home, don't say them outside. So what do you think about teenagers swearing?
That's actually a gift, by the way, because we're taught. The reason why those words work is because we're taught they're taboo, and our brain stores them in a certain way that makes them off limits. So that makes it feel so good to let it go. So by telling your kids you shouldn't swear, that you're actually creating the power of the words. But it's weird. I think it. I'm just thinking about my own kids. They're a little bit embarrassed of me swearing. I don't swear a lot in front of them, but they're aware of my work. And I think that probably that's their number one thing that if they really want to get my goat, they'll say, "You are such a hypocrite." And it's usually dripping with that condescending tone too. So I don't know. If you're not a hypocrite, you're probably not a parent. So I don't know what to say.
My theory is they're going to go for therapy. They might as well have something to talk about. Give them something.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So what are the top 3 most common problems you identify when working with parents of teenagers?
Yeah. So I would say the number one reason why parents consult me is they want to control their kids. They want me to tell them what to do to get their kid to behave. And the idea behind this is I want to save them from making the same mistakes that I made or mistakes that are going to ruin their life. So the number one reason is people are looking for strategies to influence their child's behavior. The second is often, let me see how I wrote this down, communication. So essentially, both sides, parents and teens, saying, "You're not hearing me, you're not listening." And they're talking back and forth, but nobody is really hearing what the other person's saying. So they're fighting a lot. That's my number two. And I think the third one that I hear most often is, "My child is so disrespectful. I didn't raise him or her or they to be that way. Why is this?" And there's this idea that something is wrong with my child, and they're looking for some validation that their child is normal and they didn't mess up in some catastrophic way.
Okay, so those top three things, first of all, I felt them all as you said them. Like that moment where someone says to you, "Well, you can't make your kid do anything." And also in one very particular moment in my life, it was like, maybe you should come in and talk to me instead of your kid, because I think you're the one that needs work, right? And then of course communication is so hard, and that feeling like you will not talk to me like that, you will not live in the world with this disrespect. It's all of our fear that we're not. So I'm speaking as a mom. Do dads have the same top three? Is there a gender difference or a parent difference?
Well, I would say right off the bat, there's a gender difference in terms of who comes to therapy. I don't see that many dads. I do see some dads, but not that many. And dads' issues almost always revolve around respect. And this idea of they don't feel respected by their children.
That's hard. That's tough.
Yeah.
Um, how important is it as for us as parents to understand what's driving our reaction to that? Whether for the three things you gave, like really understanding what happened in your life, what brings you to this point today to have a different expectation of your teenager.
Well, the again, going back to the wanting to control, we want to protect our children, and that's very natural. But if we protect them too much, we they don't learn skills along the way to kind of navigate life. And there's no skipping a step. I get it. I don't want them to make the same mistake, but sometimes they have to. That's how they learn. And managing one's anxiety is hugely important, because then kids already, if you think about a teenager, their brains aren't done growing and they haven't developed the skills to rein it in, and sometimes they're a live wire. Throwing your energy, your uncontrolled energy, into that scenario is like pouring gasoline on a fire. I had a professor say to me a long time ago, and it was so important. He said, "Sometimes all you can do is be a calm presence." And that's enough, because it provides a space, a calm space for figuring things out. And so parents feel like, "I'm not doing anything," or "I'm not doing enough." That's plenty. So why should parents understand what's driving their behavior? Because it just then it makes it even more messy. And it's like I not to compare kids to dogs, but I'm going to kind of compare kids to dogs. I say, have you ever seen like a dog can kind of smell fear or sense fear? Have you heard that? Kids too, like they pick up on emotions, and then they're going to be reactive to that. So the cleaner you can be, the better.
I also like think that this feeling that we want to keep them from making the same mistakes we did, or making any mistakes if we can. It's a fear that our kids can't do it. What does that tell our kids? What does that do to our kids? If and we live in a generation where we tend to go in and try and fix their problems. So what's the message to the kids?
That you can't do it. And if I go back and say, in my graduate school training, that was one of the very first lessons that we were taught, is you can see the person across from you as a victim who needs you, or somebody who's been surviving before they met you and will survive after they know you. And so I think conveying that sense of confidence, and indeed that mistakes are okay, that even there is no, and we tell ourselves the world is binary, so that we know there's a right answer and a wrong answer. But matter of fact, most of life is the shade of gray. And I think that we do our kids a disservice when we're communicating that there is that the mistakes aren't okay. I remember my teenage son walking with me one day. He had gotten in trouble for something, and he said, "Mom, I hope when I grow up, I never make mistakes." And I said, "Oh my gosh, I hope you liberally make mistakes because that's how you're going to grow as a person." So that calm presence is providing a safe space for making mistakes, accepting those, and understanding what to do about them in a healthy way.
I think that's so interesting because I think as we try to teach parents to, and in general, be in a society where we're taking risks and failing, or whatever word we want to use, not doing as well as we'd hoped, whatever, we want to encourage that. But we don't typically do that for ourselves. Like, that's an outward looking perspective. So parenting is like inherently flawed. No one's going to get it right. How do we turn that around and kind of say we tried and we're gonna, I don't know.
It takes a lot of practice. I think that you have to be compassionate with yourself. And I do tell people all the time, look, everybody has baggage. Everybody. And recently, again, I have teenagers. I had my teenager said to me that I have messed him up already for life because his life has been too easy. So you see, when there's no right path out. And I think, again, that's the wrong message. The problem is that parents make the stakes too high in their head. So there feels like there's no room to make a mistake because you're telling yourself that you're going to screw your kid up for life. And fact of the matter is that that's flawed thinking. Kids are very resilient. I told a colleague a long time ago when she had her first child, I said, what I've learned in psychology is you have to screw up in very significant ways over a long period of time to do lasting damage. And liberal use of "I'm sorry" goes a long way. It's about intention. So it's a practice, and surrounding yourself with therapy is good, and surrounding yourself with a support group of other parents who are real and authentic. It doesn't feel really good to be around people who are just telling great stories and all their successes and they're wonderful. That doesn't feel good for anybody.
I think I was late to the "I'm sorry" game as a parent, but when I jumped in, I saw like the power, even when I'm wrong. I mean, even when I'm not wrong is when I'm wrong, it's easier to do that. But there are times where I've used it just because I want a relationship with my kid and they're not able to see it any other way than they're in right now. And yeah, I wish I had jumped into that game much earlier, but boy, is that a powerful tool. I think people think it's a weak tool, but it actually turns out to be so powerful.
100%. And what a great lesson to teach your kids.
I don't know if I taught that so well.
I'm still waiting. Work in progress.
Yeah, that's a work in progress. Okay, so parents are looking for help, and most of my parenting, like teenage kids, has come through your teen with access to unbelievable experts like you. If people are looking, they maybe aren't going to be able to afford or find a therapist that they go to personally. Where's a great resource outside of yourteenmag.com? Where would you recommend parents go to? Like they kind of are hearing this and going like, I think I could use some help. I think what she's saying is true and I want to get some help, but I maybe want to just dip my toe into this.
So there is a publisher who specializes in self-help, and it's called New Harbinger, newharbinger.com. And they only publish workbooks written by mental health professionals. And they're fabulous. And they cover this broad spectrum of concerns that folks have. And I think that's a great place to start, particularly if you don't have resources. You can probably get a book for $15 and it's doing therapy with yourself. And every time I'm looking for a particular resource for somebody on a topic, they seem to have it all covered. So that would be a place where I would start.
Great. I think about this one all the time. I knew the parent I wanted to be based on the parent I didn't want to be from how I was parented. And I think people go one of two ways, right? Like you either had like this in your either real or in your mind idyllic childhood and you want to be like your parents were, or you want to be nothing like your parents were. So how do we recognize, because sometimes I overcorrected. Sometimes I was like, I am never doing that. And it was damaging because it was so extreme the other way. How do parents, first of all, identify what those things are and then find a healthy space?
Well, I think so. There's not going to be a quick answer to this. It's about being self-reflective, and I guess always being able to ask yourself, how am I doing? And don't be afraid to ask for feedback. Hopefully, you have somebody in your life who can provide you with honest feedback. And honestly, one really great tool that I don't think families take advantage of enough is like a monthly family meeting where everybody, you can submit to the agenda and there's a check-in, like, how are you doing? Here's my feedback for you, and being willing as a parent to accept feedback. I think that the bottom line is it's being reflective, it's asking for feedback, and it's always being ready to and willing to change course if needed. The problem is the guilt and the shame filter that we have then shuts all of that down, and we feel like we can't talk about it, or we would be too embarrassed, or we should be embarrassed. And sadly, then that just interferes with forward progress.
I read a book, and then I actually interviewed Bruce Feiler, and the book is Secrets of Happy Families. And so he talks a lot about like the family meeting, and I was all in. I loved the idea so much, and I had to like beg and beg and beg for a Sunday night family meeting. And then it was Monday morning, and my kids said, "What happened to last night's meeting?" And I was like, I forgot. It was so heartbreaking. Anyway, it's a great book if anyone is looking for I mean, I think he looks at industry a lot to see how can you apply what happens in the workforce and apply some of it at home, and it still remains one of my favorite books. Okay, our last question. Oh,
I just want to say it's continuous quality improvement, right? That gets at what you're saying.
Yeah.
You're not always going to nail it.
Yeah. And actually not feeling bad about that, because this is just life, getting it wrong, pivoting, getting it wrong again, right? Okay, what's your most hopeful advice for parents of teenagers?
What I try to tell teenagers is also what I try to tell parents of teenagers is what I also tell myself. And that is, you make the investment, but you're not going to see the immediate return. And the reminding yourself that there are works in progress. And I think the hopeful advice is their brain's not done growing for many years after being a teenager. And so it's yet to be revealed who they're going to be and how they're going to be. But parents have a significant influence on them. Even if you don't feel like you do, you typically don't see that until after they're out of high school.
Yeah, it's a horrible equation if you like getting grades.
Exactly, or any kind of return on investment,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, you wait a really long time to see if it worked. Anyway, Jodie, thank you so much for being here with us. Hold up your book one more time.
Yes, check this out. This is I got to get back. I'm coming this way.
Backwards.
Badass
Stories, Grit, Growth, Hope, and Healing in the Shit Show.
Wherever you buy books.
Thanks so much for being here with us.